He killed his way to the top without blinking an eye, wanting fear to be the emotion you feel when the thought of him occurs. Albert Anastasia, the Mad Hatter who terrified the mob. They called him the Mad Hatter, the Lord High Executioner, the most feared killer in the American mafia. Albert Anastasia didn't just murder people, he built an empire on murder itself. He created Murder Incorporated, a contract-killing operation so efficient, so ruthless, that even other mobsters were terrified of him. For decades, he was untouchable. A man so violent that bosses across the country paid him to eliminate their problems. But in the world of organized crime, fear only protects you for so long. And when the mob decides you're too dangerous to live, not even the Lord High Executioner can escape his fate. This is the story of Albert Anastasia, the gangster who made killing a business, and the barbershop where his reign of terror finally ended. The immigrant killer Umberto Anastasio was born on September 26, 1902, in Tropea, a small coastal town in Calabria, Italy. He was one of 9 brothers, and the family lived in poverty like millions of other southern Italians at the turn of the century. His father worked as a railroad worker, barely scraping together enough to feed his large family. There was no future in Tropea for the Anastasio brothers, only generations of the same grinding poverty. In 1917, at 15 years old, Umberto boarded a ship bound for America. He traveled with several of his brothers, all seeking the opportunity that Italy couldn't provide. They arrived at Ellis Island and settled in Brooklyn, joining the massive wave of Italian immigrants flooding into New York City's tenements. Like thousands of other immigrant families, they Americanized their name. Anastasio became Anastasia. Young Albert found work on the Brooklyn docks as a longshoreman. The waterfront in those days was brutal. Backbreaking labor for poverty wages, controlled by criminal gangs who extorted the workers and ran illegal operations out of the shipping warehouses. It was also a perfect training ground for a future mobster. The docks taught violence, loyalty, and the real rules of survival in America. By 1920, Anastasia had graduated from dock work to dock crime. He was arrested for killing a fellow longshoreman during a dispute. The details are murky. Some accounts say it was over money, others over an insult. What's clear is that at 18 years old, Albert Anastasia had committed his first known murder. He was convicted and sentenced to death, but he never faced the electric chair. Through a combination of legal maneuvering, witness intimidation, and possibly bribes, he won a retrial. By the time the second trial came around, witnesses had disappeared or changed their stories. The case fell apart. Anastasia walked free, and he learned a valuable lesson. In America, if you were smart and ruthless enough, you could literally get away with murder. Throughout the 1920s, Anastasia worked his way deeper into Brooklyn's criminal underworld. He became affiliated with Joe the Boss Masseria, one of the 2 most powerful mafia bosses in New York. But he also formed a crucial partnership with a young, ambitious gangster named Charles Lucky Luciano. That partnership would change everything: the Castellammarese War and the birth of the Commission. By 1930, New York's Italian underworld was at war. Joe Masseria and Salvatore Maranzano, 2 old-world Sicilian bosses, were fighting for control of the city's rackets. Bodies piled up on both sides. The conflict became known as the Castellammarese War, named after Maranzano's hometown in Sicily. Anastasia fought for Masseria, serving as one of his most reliable killers. But behind the scenes, Lucky Luciano was planning something revolutionary. He believed the old mustache Petes, traditional bosses like Masseria and Maranzano, who clung to old-world Sicilian traditions, were holding organized crime back. They refused to work with non-Italians, they wouldn't cooperate with other ethnic gangs, and their constant wars were bad for business. Luciano recruited a core group of young mobsters who shared his vision: Meyer Lansky, Bugsy Siegel, Frank Costello, Vito Genovese, and Albert Anastasia. Together, they plotted to eliminate both bosses and restructure the American mafia entirely. On April 15, 1931, Luciano set up his own boss. He invited Masseria to lunch at a Coney Island restaurant called Nuova Via Tamaro. After the meal, Luciano excused himself to the bathroom. 4 men walked in, reportedly Vito Genovese, Joe Adonis, Bugsy Siegel, and Albert Anastasia. They shot Masseria to death while he sat at the table. Luciano was in the bathroom establishing his alibi. With Masseria dead, Maranzano declared himself boss of all bosses and reorganized New York's mafia into 5 families. But his reign lasted only months. Luciano had already decided Maranzano had to go. On September 10, 1931, 4 men posing as federal agents entered Maranzano's office and stabbed and shot him to death. Albert Anastasia was widely believed to be one of the killers. With both old bosses dead, Luciano and his allies restructured organized crime. They created the Commission, a governing body of the most powerful bosses that would settle disputes, authorize hits, and prevent destructive wars. It was organized crime's corporate board of directors, and it would govern the American mafia for decades. Anastasia became a capo in what would become the Gambino crime family, but his real power came from something else entirely. Murder Incorporated. Murder Incorporated, killing as a business. In the early 1930s, the newly formed commission faced a problem. They needed a way to enforce their decisions, eliminate problems, and maintain control without every family maintaining their own armies of killers. The solution was Murder Incorporated, a dedicated hit squad that would handle contract killings for the commission and various crime families. The operation was based in Brooklyn and was officially run by Louis Lepke, Buchalter, and Albert the Mad Hatter Anastasia. Below them were lieutenants like Abe Kid Twist, Ruthless, and Martin Bugsy Goldstein, and dozens of professional killers drawn primarily from Jewish and Italian gangs in Brooklyn. Murder Inc. operated like a business. When a commission member or an affiliate boss needed someone killed, they put in a request. The contract would be evaluated, approved, and then assigned to a team with no personal connection to the victim. This separation between client and killer made investigations nearly impossible. The hitmen often traveled to other cities to do the job, ensuring local police had no suspects with obvious motives. Between 1930 and 1940, Murder Inc. is estimated to have killed between 400 and 1,000 people. The exact number will never be known. They used guns, knives, ice picks, ropes, and anything else that worked. They killed in alleys, cars, hotels, and restaurants. They were efficient, professional, and absolutely terrifying. Anastasia loved the work. While Lepke handled the business and administrative side, Anastasia personally participated in murders and managed the killers directly. He earned his nickname, the Lord High Executioner, during this period. He wasn't just ordering hits, he was doing them himself. Stories spread throughout the underworld about his brutality and his hair-trigger temper. He would kill over a perceived insult. He would kill witnesses. He would kill anyone who became a problem. His reputation for violence was so extreme that even other mobsters feared him. That fear became a form of power. People didn't cross Anastasia because they knew what would happen. But Murder Inc.'s reign of terror ended in 1940 when Abe Ruthless, one of Anastasia's top killers, was arrested for murder. Facing the electric chair, Ruthless made a decision that would shock the underworld. He became a government witness. And he didn't just confess to his own crimes, he gave prosecutors everything. Names, dates, methods, victims. He exposed the entire operation. Ruthless's testimony sent multiple Murder Inc. members to the electric chair, including Martin Goldstein and Harry Pittsburgh Phil Strauss. Lepke Buchalter himself was eventually executed. The organization collapsed. Anastasia should have gone down too. Ruthless had information on numerous murders Anastasia had committed or ordered. But on November 12, 1941, something remarkable happened. Ruthless fell out of a 6th-floor window at the Half Moon Hotel in Coney Island, where he was being held under police protection. He died instantly. The official story was that he was trying to escape using a makeshift rope of bedsheets. Nobody believed it. The window was too high, the sheets too short, and Ruthless had been cooperating fully. He had no reason to escape. Most historians believe he was thrown out the window by corrupt police officers on Anastasia's payroll. With Ruthless dead, the key witness against Anastasia was gone. The cases against him collapsed. He walked free once again. Rising to boss during World War II, Anastasia did something unexpected. He joined the U.S. Army. He served from 1942 to 1944 and received an honorable discharge. Some historians believe this was a calculated move to improve his public image and gain citizenship. He became a U.S. citizen during this period. Others think he genuinely wanted to serve. Whatever his motivations, his military service created a strange contradiction. A mass murderer with an honorable military record. After the war, Anastasia returned to the life and continued rising through the ranks. By the late 1940s, he had become underboss of the Mangano crime family, one of New York's 5 families. But he had a problem. The boss, Vincent Mangano, hated him. The two men had been at odds for years, and the tension was reaching a breaking point. On April 19, 1951, Vincent Mangano disappeared. His body was never found. His brother Philip Mangano was found shot to death in a marsh near Sheepshead Bay. Everyone knew Anastasia had ordered the hits, but there was no proof. The commission investigated, but couldn't, or wouldn't, do anything about it. Albert Anastasia became the new boss of the family, which would later become known as the Gambino family. He had finally reached the top. As boss, Anastasia expanded the family's operations. He controlled the Brooklyn docks, ran extensive gambling operations, and maintained lucrative rackets in labor unions and construction. He became extraordinarily wealthy, living in a mansion in Fort Lee, New Jersey, with his wife and 4 children. But he was also becoming a problem. His violence was no longer strategic. It was impulsive and reckless. In 1952, he allegedly ordered the murder of Arnold Schuster, a civilian who had witnessed and reported bank robber Willie Sutton to police. Schuster had nothing to do with organized crime. He was just a citizen doing his civic duty. But Anastasia saw him on television and reportedly said, "I can't stand squealers. Hit that guy." The murder of a civilian who had exposed a bank robber, not a mobster, violated the unwritten rules of the mafia. It brought unnecessary heat from law enforcement and public outrage. Other bosses began to see Anastasia as a liability. His relationship with Vito Genovese, boss of another family, deteriorated. Genovese was ambitious and wanted more power within the commission. He began building alliances, and he identified Anastasia as an obstacle. Meanwhile, Anastasia's own underboss, Carlo Gambino, was growing tired of his boss's erratic behavior and increasingly violent decisions. Gambino was a traditional mobster who believed in subtlety and patience. Anastasia's recklessness endangered the entire family. In 1957, Genovese and Gambino began planning something that would have been unthinkable just years earlier: the assassination of Albert Anastasia, the Lord High Executioner himself. The barbershop, October 25, 1957. A Friday morning in Midtown Manhattan. Albert Anastasia followed his usual routine. He was staying at the Park Sheraton Hotel, the same hotel where Arnold Rothstein had been shot in 1928. Around 10 a.m., he took the elevator down to the hotel's barbershop in the lobby. The Park Sheraton barbershop was a familiar place for Anastasia. He had been getting his haircut there for years. He walked in, greeted the staff, and settled into chair number 4. The barber, Joseph Bocchino, draped a sheet over him and reclined the chair. Anastasia closed his eyes and relaxed. His bodyguard, Anthony Coppola, had conveniently left to park the car and take a walk. Clear evidence that the hit was coordinated with people inside Anastasia's own organization. At approximately 10:20 a.m., 2 men walked into the barbershop wearing scarves over their faces and fedora hats pulled low. They moved quickly and with purpose. They pulled out guns and opened fire. Anastasia, seeing the gunman in the mirror, tried to rise from the chair. In his confusion and panic, he lunged at their reflections in the mirror rather than turning to face his attackers. Bullets struck him in the back of the head and body. He stumbled forward and collapsed on the floor, still wrapped in the barber's sheet. The gunman fired several more shots into his body to make certain he was dead, then ran out of the barbershop, through the hotel lobby, and disappeared into the crowded streets of Manhattan. They were never identified. They were never caught. Albert Anastasia, the Lord High Executioner, the man who had killed countless others and built an empire on murder, died on a barbershop floor at 55 years old. The iconic crime scene photographs, showing his body crumpled on the floor, the barber chair covered in blood, became some of the most famous images in mob history. The aftermath. The murder was clearly a commission-sanctioned hit. You didn't kill a boss of a New York family without permission from the other bosses. The investigation pointed to several suspects, but no one was ever charged. Most historians believe the killers were members of the Gallo brothers' crew, working on orders from Vito Genovese and with the approval of Carlo Gambino. Some accounts name the shooters as Larry Gallo and Crazy Joe Gallo, though this has never been confirmed. What is confirmed is that Carlo Gambino immediately took over the family, and Vito Genovese consolidated his power, at least temporarily. A few weeks after Anastasia's murder, Genovese called the infamous Appalachian meeting, where dozens of mob bosses gathered in upstate New York. The meeting was raided by police, creating a public relations disaster for the mafia and eventually leading to Genovese's downfall. Anastasia was buried at Greenwood Cemetery in Brooklyn. Hundreds attended his funeral, though many came out of obligation rather than affection. He left behind a wife and 4 children who had lived comfortable lives funded by his criminal empire, but who now had to live with his legacy. Legacy, the man who made murder a business. Albert Anastasia's impact on organized crime is undeniable, even if his methods were brutal and his end was violent. He helped create Murder Incorporated, which revolutionized how the mafia handled contract killings. He was instrumental in the Castellammarese War and the formation of the Commission. He controlled the Brooklyn waterfront for decades and built one of the most powerful crime families in America. But he's also remembered as a cautionary tale. His violence, which had been an asset when he was a soldier and capo, became a liability when he became a boss. His impulsiveness and rage made him unpredictable and dangerous, not just to his enemies, but to his allies. In the end, the very traits that helped him rise to power ensured his destruction. The Mad Hatter thought he was untouchable. He had survived murder convictions, federal investigations, and countless enemies. He had killed his way to the top and believed fear would keep him safe. But in the mafia, fear only protects you until someone becomes more afraid of letting you live than they are of killing you. And when that moment comes, not even the Lord High Executioner can escape his fate. Albert Anastasia died the same way he had lived, violently, suddenly, and without mercy. He built an empire on murder, and murder was exactly how his empire ended.